Alright, so tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, my name's Ed. I like making tunes, I like beating a bit of guitar, beating a bit of drums,
Right,
making some noise. Just like the way it makes me feel, you know?
So you're a music guy.
Yeah, I love music.
So what do you like about music then?
There's something a wise guy once said, what was it? Music is all around us. All a composer needs to do is simply close his eyes, pick which music he likes and take it from the air. And that's kind of the nature of music. It's separate from the mundane aspects of humanity. And therefore it's essentially euphoria, the feeling you get from it. You get this sort of sense of being taken to another world.
A great feeling.
Great, yeah, great feeling.
Eases you.
Yeah, pleases. But there's also the sense of performing music is different to also listening. It's a different feeling of joy. And therefore producing music is a different feeling of having everything sort of come together in the same sense that a composer probably gets that click that he's been essentially gambling, writing sheet music down and not hearing how the whole thing sounds for an entire orchestra, and then suddenly the first horn's being played and, you know, the clarity of what the piece should be sounding like is realised to him. I mean, not all of us are like Mozart, writing the things out in our heads before we even start writing anything down.
So I gather you're a fan of the classics. You just mentioned Mozart.
Mozart, oh yeah. Who's the big
Any other favourites?
Big boy. Wagner is a big boy. Yep. Elgar was the wise man I quoted earlier. Who else is there? Chopin, I think. Yeah. Really identifies like the actual sort of fragility of the sort of sense of feelings you get from music, and the sort of rubato, so that robbing of time where he just holds a note and just holds on it longer than it's written to, just feeling the music, and that expanded all the way into jazz, spans all the way nowadays into music, and that's what the sort of current climate of music we're seeing now. We're seeing cliche sounds of the sort of, you know, typical music industry pop world, and we're seeing really experimental producers try and come up with their own understanding of music, not necessarily from traditional, you know, music theory background learnings, or not even from traditional beat making sort of schools or anything like that. You have these people. There's this band that I'm thinking of, actually, the Shags, where they were three girls who their dad reckoned would become three superstars, the big three female rock band, and he thought this would happen because the fortune teller told him it would happen. He didn't bother teaching them anything about music. He also didn't know anything about music. That's the great thing. So they had no clue what they were doing, but they made the most avant-garde sounding stuff in existence, because of course this is them trying to understand what music is with no traditional sort of, essentially, if you're trying to get to the shops, they're walking down, they don't know any way to go, so they essentially figure out a brand new path. And that's what we're seeing nowadays with the democratization of a lot of audio processors, with stuff like Ableton, Logic, Pro Tools and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, exciting times, but also at the moment, because everyone keeps making the same stuff because it's safe, boring times. So that's what we got going on for us.
And looking at the evolution of music, from the classical period up until today, modern sort of styles that you get, where you've just mentioned everybody's copying everybody else,
everyone's
just
playing the same 808
just
drums,
to whip out a hit, one hit wonder, so to speak. Like, do you like the way music's going? You foresee
it's sort of branching out as far as what the consumer market is for it nowadays. So you do have the audience for albums. You do have the audience for singles. You do have the audience that will just follow an artist forever and ever until the end of time, and then the ones that will just follow him and when he's basically hot shit and drop as soon as like a scandal happens to him, sort of thing, or her. I mean, apps like Spotify. YouTube,
so Spotify has changed the game, haven't they? Whereas before you could just...
It's just, well, I mean, it's mainly moved into the live world, which is dead at the moment because of COVID. Right. Yeah, it's 2020, by the way. Yeah. In case you don't know. But what's it? 2020. Spotify's basically taken it and handed the entire power over to consumers and over to the mass of consumers. They'll decide what is a hit and what isn't a hit. And there isn't really much way in between. If you want to be an artist or someone selling records nowadays, much more you can do with that. You're not going to make a hit album on Spotify. You'll make a hit song like Old Town Road. It's a perfect example. Just a hit song that just kept going and going until it reached #1. But Spotify and stuff like that, they've handed more power over to the consumer, which, whether or not you think that's a good or bad thing, is kind of your attitude to wider humanity, I suppose.
And does that give the artists greater independence and autonomy? Because before, you know,
the artist has never had independence and autonomy. Even back in the classical days, they were commissioned and told what to write, and if the person who commissioned them and paid them didn't like it, they were getting sacked.
Of course.
You can't make money in the same way a bakery makes money as a musician. You have to get lucky and have something that people want, and that is down to just luck, whether or not you've got the shit people want. And there's always kind of been poor protection for individual musicians and artists in the music industry. I think all that's done is given them less sort of level of support that they would have got maybe from a record label, maybe from a company or a sort of session band that they might be a part of. I don't even really think a lot of session bands exist anymore in the sort of sense they used to in the 60s and 70s, where this would be the band for the studio. Now you don't even have that. You have a drummer for the studio, you have guitarists for the studio, and we can get people in if we need to be, sort of thing, rather than this is what we're working with, give them your sheet music and they'll figure something out. Which was how we get stuff like Otis Redding and all the fancy soul stuff back in the day. But that can only happen if, in the sort of sense of Sam Smith Adele, when people are making a whole album to sound like that sort of thing. It's not going to happen just on a fluke anymore nowadays.
And would it be easier in today's day and age to get into the music industry, to make it as an artist?
Make it as an artist? Let's say make it is just, you know, making a living sort of thing, you know, surviving whilst doing what you love. It depends. I mean, simply just creating music and making money off people buying it, no, not possible. There are very rare moments when in the history of the music industry where that is possible. I'd say 70s maybe if you're lucky enough 80s, but even then the labels kind of dominated the world. It's hard to make. Either you're quite happy living in a caravan and making, you know, sort of ends meet, that kind of thing, as a music artist, or you need a label behind you if you want to make some big money. And even then, that's a risk.
And finally, what do you think the industry needs to change and get rid of?
More people understanding audio,
right.
synthesis,
right.
Understanding how audio works and why what we perceive is perceived the way it is, and that sort of stuff. And also understanding the very foundations of music and why we enjoy it,
cool.
Rather than looking for that sound or looking to recreate this or that sort of thing. Branching out.
I see. Alright, well thank you, man. Really appreciate your help.